Asia Pacific Common Position. Thanks. I'd really appreciate it if you can put that in the chat, and everybody in the audience, if you follow that link, you can find the common position in English and also translated into Chinese, Russian, Bahasa Malaysia, Hindi, and Urdu. Please contact us following the meeting to let us know if you would like to see the common position translated into further local languages from the region. An overview of the common position has also been submitted as an NGO written statement number 5 to the CND this year. I'm very pleased to say that 82 civil society organizations have already signed on to the common position, but if you and your organization haven't yet, please take the time to follow the link, read through the common position, and sign on. So I'd like to take this opportunity to also thank the co-sponsors of our side event today. Thank you to the UNODC Civil Society Unit, the Government of Australia, ARTM Macau, the International Movement for the Advancement of Education, Culture, Social and Economic Development in India, and the Pakistan Youth Organization for your support for this event. Today, we have a very exciting array of speakers from the region here to present their work and discuss how the common position may support this work on the ground. And I kindly ask all speakers to try to keep to time to ensure that we get to the end of the side event in time to have a short Q&A session. Mirella Dumas Frahi will open the side event with opening remarks from the UNODC Civil Society Unit, and then it will then be followed by a short overview of the Asia Pacific Working Group and the consultation process that we went through this year by our working group member, Mr. Sana Allah Rathor. And we'll then have a brief overview of the common position document itself from our working group member, Augusto Noguera. We will then have 5 short interventions from members of civil society in the region who have signed on to the common position. So on that note, I'll now hand over to our first speaker, Mirella Dumas Frahi from the UNODC Civil Society Unit for opening remarks. Thank you, Mirella.
Thank you, Penny, and thank you, Augusto, for the invitation. And it's really a pleasure for me to be here. I will be very brief because I heard that there are many interesting interventions. But I really wanted to be here, first of all, because we are hosting this session of the CND with 195 NGO representatives registered online, and only 10 could come in person. So in normal time, I would be here with you, but of course, we are still living this virtual time with the hope that soon we will be able to work together in person. And I really wanted to congratulate all of you who has worked very hard during 1 year on finding this and drafting this common position. I know your work has started early 2021, and the work, and really like the final version was finalized in December 2021. So in really an entire year, and finally it is submitted to the CND. So as Penny said, 62 members have signed it, 62 NGO. I'm sure more will come. And what will be more interesting is really the work ahead. And we are happy as UNODC and the Civil Society Unit, which, as you know, is in the Division for Policy and Public Affairs of UNODC. We will be very happy to help, if possible, in bringing forward, in having real regional consultation in the coming years, so that we put in practice and implement this common position. Thank you all, and wish you a good and fruitful session. Bye.
Thank you very much, Mirella, and thank you for those kind comments. We're really happy to be working with the Civil Society Unit through the process of consulting on the common position this year, and we hope that that continues, as you say. So I'll now hand over to my working group colleague, Mr. Sana Rathore, to give an overview of the work of the working group this year and the consultation process that we went through. Over to you, Sana.
Hi, everyone. So as my colleague, Ms. Penny Hill mentioned that we have start working in early 20. First of all, I welcome Mr. Jamie Bridge, the chair, VNGOC, and Ms. Mirella. The both have our guest joined us and give us the opportunity to talk the other civil society NGOs. So first, I would like to share that in 2019, the VNGOC given the call for the common for the working group, and then in 2020 we formed the working group, and in February 2021 we start working in for the common position on drugs. So first of all, the few members joined the working group like Penny, me, and Augusto, and Mr. Samir, and then later on the other group joined the working group. In fact, this working group established because the number of the regions are not involved in the Vienna NGOs committee. That's why this group was formed. Now I come to the share with you how this working group work on the common position on drugs. So we the group started working in February 2021, and with the kickoff meeting to discuss a common position on drugs, and then the working group organize and conduct a side event in the 64th CND in April 2021. And the number of NGOs and civil society organizations joined the side event. More than 70 people joined this our side events. And after that, we conduct the 3 consultations, that is one in July, and then October and November, wherein the civil society organization participated, and then the civil society organization representative sent the different suggestions about the common position of drugs. And another thing which I mentioned earlier, then some few members joined the working group, and they also given their inputs regarding common position of the drug. And in December, we are in position to make it the final draft, and then we share with the different our friends, and this paper was also available online, and then they give the different suggestions and inputs regarding the common position and drugs. So now today we are in the position to presenting the common position on drugs, and my colleague Augusto will provide you the summary regarding the common position of drugs, which the civil society of the Asia Pacific region worked on it. So in the end, I will congratulate my working group members, especially the Penny, Augusto, Mr. Samir, Asya. Might be I not remember all the my group members' name. So all the members contributed a lot for this paper. And last but not least, I also thankful to the our chair, Mr. Jamie, and also Sarah. He helped us a lot for the whole process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sana, for that great overview of the process we went through this year towards towards the common position. So now is the perfect time to hand over to Augusto, who will give us a short overview of the document itself. Over to you, Augusto.
Thank you, Penny. So first of all, allow me to thank you very much for attending this side event, to all that registered and are here now. And we hope that this common position can have a significant impact on in our region. Second, I would like to share my appreciation and sincere thanks to all that have saved no efforts in contributing to this common position. And of course, to my colleagues of the working group that during almost 2 years we have been working on this, and also to our safeguard that helped us a lot, Sarah Picker as well. This document, I mean, it's not easy to achieve a balanced position, a common position, let's say, that satisfied all. We believe we did a very good balanced document, and we didn't take any side. We input almost all concerns and suggestions and achievements that we collect during the consultations, during the process that our colleagues sent to us. And if some were not input in document, please accept our apologies. Yet this common position is not finished, and we can continue working on that. This document, this common position, incorporates the perspectives and the guide work of a wide range of drug-related NGOs from across the Asia-Pacific region, seeks to help shape and guide civil society and governmental response in the Asia-Pacific region in coming years, providing support to NGOs working in the region, creating opportunities for civil society, government agencies, and regional mechanisms across the region to work together towards common goals. This paper is a summary of the Asia-Pacific Civil Society Common Position on Drugs, available to read and for NGOs to sign in the VNGOC website. There's 3 important points. The common position seeks to capture a consensus among civil society organizations from across the Asia-Pacific region, reflecting the need for placing human rights, health, and evidence at the center of all drug policies. The critical role of civil society organizations in the region is recognized in the document, which also briefly outlines the achievements and challenge of civil society in the region. 24 recommendations that you can see in the common position in the VNGOC website from civil society are presented in the document, issuing a call to action for member states and multilateral bodies to work alongside civil society in relation to 1. Existing international commitments and treaties relating to drug policy, the inclusion of the civil society, human rights, health, criminal justice response, development, cross-cutting issues. Through this document, civil society organizations whose work relates to narcotic drugs in the Asia-Pacific region commit to working with Asian member states from the region and multilateral bodies to ensure the voice of civil society is heard in the creation of evidence-based laws, policies, and interventions in line with the regional and international treaties and declarations. Therefore, we urge member states from the Asia-Pacific region to recognize these recommendations and work with the local civil society organizations to implement the recommendations with local response to the world drug situation. We urge all civil society from the Asia-Pacific to read the common position and to host meetings with your governments and debate what can be done, what needs to change, what can be improved. We urge even those that somehow cannot sign the common position to analyze the document. We are sure that many recommendations can be worked and tangible. Finally, we urge member states to work with the civil society organizations to strive to continue to overcome challenge and continue to build on our achievements to place human rights, health, and evidence at the center of all drug policies. Thank you very much. So now I leave to Kenny then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Augusto. Just to clarify one thing that Augusto said, this is the final version of the common position.
Yes.
We've gone through that very extensive consultation process and opened up the document 3 times in consultation settings. And we've now already had, as I say, 82 organizations sign onto the document. However, I think what Augusto was trying to say was
exactly.
that we are going to continue the discussions on all of the content that is in the common position, and we will continue the work of the Asia Pacific Working Group and take on all feedback from all of our civil society members to ensure that we can implement the common position as best as possible in the region. As I noted before, and also as Augusto mentioned, we're really impressed by the way the working group came together and expanded to represent that very broad diversity of perspectives of various civil society organizations across the region, and came together to find consensus for the common position document. But as I say, we will be continuing these discussions on all of these key points and recommendations that have been brought up in the common position, and we thank you for all of your support and all of the input that we've had throughout the consultation process. So on that note, and I'm very excited to say we're exactly on time, so I really want to thank my working group members for their timeliness, and also Mirella today for getting us halfway through the side event in time for all of the interventions that we have coming from our 5 civil society speakers. So on that note, I will introduce our very first speaker today, Dr. Koval Deep Kaur, who has a doctorate in social sciences from IIT Guwahati, who has experience of 14+ years in the field of research in drugs, drug trade, and prevention science. She's a member of the board of the International Society of the Study of Drug Policy, ISSDP, and is a published author with a range of international publications of illicit drugs and related issues. Today, Dr. Kaur is presenting on behalf of the South Asian Drugs and Addictions Research Council, explaining how civil society organizations can be instrumental in connecting relevant institutions and the private sector, and cooperate with state institutions in mobilizing community and awareness generation, including advocacy for policies and practices to deal with the multi-dimensional threat of drug trafficking fueled by global proliferation of powerful communications and encryption technologies. Over to you, Dr. Kaur. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. I thank VNGOC for this opportunity, and it will be my effort here to present and discuss harm reduction interventions and civil society responses as they push forth for reforms, change, and the challenges. At UNGAS 2016, the member states had agreed upon a joint commitment to prevent drug overdoses. It was also decided to ensure non-discriminatory access to a broad range of interventions for the management of substance use disorders. The outcome document at UNGAS 2016 emphasized on the achievement of a sustainable development goal and addressing the world drug problem as complementary and mutually reinforcing. Viewed in this context, the stagnation and regression of harm reduction responses in India could critically impair and pose a major barrier to HIV prevention and treatment. There exists ample evidence to establish that harm reduction interventions are cost-effective, people-friendly, have reduced crime rates, and have reinforced the need for development-sensitive drug policies. India has made good progress with a 32% decline in new HIV infections and a 54% decline in AIDS-related death between 2007 to 2015. This was made possible due to targeted interventions. But despite these declining trends, the vulnerability of key populations to HIV and co-infections and comorbidities remain high. In 2018, the Indian government had announced the implementation of the test and treat strategy in alignment with the 2015 WHO guidelines. Although harm reduction interventions have been widely accepted as a public health good, they often find themselves in conflict with drug policy approaches that criminalize, punish, and stigmatize people who use drugs. The rates of incarceration for people arrested for drug use and possession for personal use have surged, and compulsory detention as a form of drug treatment or rehabilitation continue. Social and religious complexities present unique challenges to the comprehensive coverage of harm reduction in India. I propose now to outline the challenges that inhibit access to harm reduction services in India and advocate for scaling up responses. The tone and the tenor of anti-narcotics control rules and regulations in the region continue to be characterized by zero-tolerance approaches and heavily oriented towards prevention. Harm reduction interventions are more often than not caught in the quagmire of legal, moral, and religious sanctions, considering the diversity of the country. Yet again, there is a vast gap between research, policy, and practice. Article 46 of the Directive Principles of State Policy, enshrined in the Constitution of our country, is invoked to justify prohibition. This implies that the Indian narcotics legislation keeps moving back and forth and is certainly not an enabling policy environment. Community delivery of treatment does not find mention in the narcotics legislation of the country. It is unfortunate again that despite the known risk, overcrowding in prisons and high-risk behavior, there is little provision of harm reduction in prisons, and even if available, they may be difficult to access due to stigma and discrimination. A recent study of prisons across India highlighted that 26% of prisoners who did not access the services meant for HIV care and prevention did so for fear of physical violence at the hands of other prisoners. Stigma and discrimination continue to impede access to harm reduction interventions, particularly in accessing services as testing, surveillance, and counseling, as well as providing legal aid. In particular, the vulnerabilities of invisible, undocumented migrant community, particularly along the prominent mobility routes, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, India, are a cause of concern for fear of identification and expulsion, both at source and destination, and stigma. They do not access basic HIV testing and treatment facilities, which places them at an increased risk of susceptibility to a host of infections. Women who use drugs, again, are particularly reluctant when it comes to seeking counseling or screening for HIV for fear of social ostracism, social exclusion, losing their employment, or even the custody of their children once their drug status is known. These barriers discourage women who use drugs from seeking prevention and treatment of blood-borne infections and harm reduction services. It is thus only an informed and empowered civil society initiative that can effectively negotiate with national governments to implement international guidance regarding implementation of harm reduction responses. The civil society organizations can play a pivotal role in ensuring stigma reduction, promotion of human rights, and ensuring access to adequate socio-legal protection. This has to go a long way in the improvement in the standard of living of the key populations in particular. The civil society initiatives must continue their work vigorously and vociferously towards mobilizing political commitment, as without sustained knowledgeable political support for harm reduction and investments to ensure adequate treatment services will be difficult. It is only through such initiatives that multi-sectoral linkages can be fostered and strengthened to expand harm reduction strategies. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaur. That was a fantastic intervention. As I was listening, I was going through the common position itself, going to point out some of the specific recommendations that you brought up, and I will mention recommendation number 6 that we have in there about implementing women-specific responses. And thank you very much for bringing up that key point. But really, I think you actually touched on a lot of the recommendations that we cover in the document. So thank you very much for your intervention today. Okay, so next up, I will hand over to my colleague, Ramli Samad. Ramli, can you just say hi so we know we've got you on the call?
Yes, hi.
There we go, fantastic. So Ramli is a member of the Asia Pacific Ad Hoc Working Group from Pengasi, Malaysia. Today, Ramli will speak to how the Common Position will support his local work in regard to advocacy as Pengasi pushes for drug law reform. He will also speak to how the Common Position can help in the process of amending the drug law in Malaysia. Over to you, Ramli. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Pengasi is an organization that consists of community-based, which members are from the former recovering addicts. And for many years, we have been lobbying for drug law reform in Malaysia and had many meetings, dialogue, discussion among various interest groups of civil society and NGOs, and even many engagement with government agencies that has taken place. However, with the COVID-19 2018, things have been put into distraction. Now seems to be the right time to push this matter up again. And with this common position is handy and timely for us, so that we will utilize this common position as guiding principles in lobbying for the Malaysian lawmaker to amend the drug law from criminal into public health issue by placing the principle of human rights, health, science, evidence-based informality in the law and policy, and to recognize the Malaysian civil society concern on the need for a drug law that promotes health-based approach instead of just punitive approach. And we will put recommendation to utilize this international standard of evidence-based principle on prevention, treatment, rehab services, including mental health issue and other comorbidities. Meanwhile, we will also highlight the good examples from some of the NGOs in the Asia-Pacific region, highlighting that people who use drugs have valuable knowledge and expertise that can be shared and utilized, especially the expertise of people in recovery to be utilized as service provider and in shaping drug policies, and the need for continuing care for recovering person, especially in the aftercare, the support system that include family, peers, and the community. And we acknowledge the role of harm reduction, intervention, and access to essential medicine. Meanwhile, we also will highlight the needs for better engagement and encourage exchange program for training placement among countries in the region, and even perhaps some funding opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramli. And I think also there is a question in the chat from Cressida about speaking to the key points of prevention in the document. I think Ramli did a good overview of part of the document that is entitled In Relation to Health, paragraphs 13, 14, and 15 and 16, where we as a working group came together to really try and balance out the recommendations we had from all throughout the consultations for prevention, treatment, recovery, and harm reduction. So as Sarah has said in the chat, we're really happy to take on further feedback from anyone who's taken part in the consultations. But this was our best effort as the working group to bring together all of the input that we had received through those consultations. So thank you, Ramli, for giving a great summary of how this will help your work in Malaysia and overviewing that, particularly that health part of the document. So thank you very much, Ramli. And I'm sorry, we can't see your video, but I'm glad that we managed to get you into the call. So the next speaker that we have this evening or this morning, depending where you all are, is Inez Feria, sorry. Inez is from Inez is from Nobox, Philippines, a civil society organization in the Philippines that is working towards reforming drug-related policies and laws. Today, Inez will present the work of Nobox as a good practice example of how implementing drug-related projects in the region and how the common position could be useful in implementation of their work. So now I'll hand over to Inez.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are now. Thank you again for this opportunity to share the Philippine experience. In preparing for this, it's difficult because a lot of the things that have been said is shared by us as well in terms of the consequences, if you will, of current drug policies. And part of our work is also in advocating for harm reduction and risk funding based on the principles of harm reduction, essentially, meaning that it's not necessarily about being service specific, but really in understanding the situations of people who may benefit from services and understanding what kind of services they need, rather than dictating on what we think they need. The past 6 years, as most of you know, have been extreme in terms of actions against people who use drugs in the Philippines. Yet, in that kind of situation, we have found that there are people, even within the government, who are genuinely wanting and desiring to be helpful and to respond to the needs of their, how would I call it, the residents in their communities. And so I guess that's kind of where I wanted to focus, where what we found out is it's difficult to push for harm reduction and policy reform if at the very core of it is, the way people understand drugs and how people who are using drugs have dictated the kinds of actions that they have taken, thinking that they're doing the right thing. So part of the work of No Box when it comes to this, in advocating, we realized we had to step back and unpack where the biases and misinformation are coming from, and to kind of present a framework from which people can respond. So we have worked with partners, for example, where they would call out the killings, but would needed direction in terms of then what, right? What are the other things that needed to be addressed? I think key was that in understanding that oftentimes it's a problem of problem identification, meaning that there was an almost automatic thinking that drugs were the problem, when in fact, in most cases, it was not. And this has been by presenting a more nuanced understanding around drugs, where a lot of the risks and harms are attributed to drugs did not come from the drug use itself, but in terms of the context in which it has taken place and in terms of the policies. So you would have, for example, so conversations like this was critical in advocating, because then you would have, for example, a local government official who was very dead set on supporting killings if need be, then realizing that, how do I call it, where after having a better understanding of the situation, he stood up and said that that was not the way to go, and that we needed to find ways to support people in ways that would really benefit them, and not in terms of dictating what we think should happen. So his is not an isolated case. And I think that is why in the past 5 years, we have also seen an increase in recognition of harm reduction as a humane response to the issues related to drugs. So part of this needing to understand, therefore, we felt that drug education is key. So we have helped develop, for example, modules in terms of drug education that give a more honest, how would you call it? Honest education, and breaking it down so that people would understand better, meaning contextualizing it and everything. Sorry. Part of the work also has been in terms of research and looking at where the gaps are in terms of do the policies reflect the realities on the ground? Meaning, in the past 5 years, there have been actions from the government there have been nice words put in issuances about being voluntary, informed consent, for human rights, but we realize it's really about, the devil's in the details. A lot of these words we have to make sure that they are translated as intended on the ground, because a lot of times there is much disconnect. So I think at the very key of it is that, sorry, am I running out of time? But at the key, I think at the core of it is just understanding that we do need to get away from a drug-free mentality, because it's not only causing the unintended consequences that we hear a lot through these past years, but it's really also tying the hands of people who want to help, because if we recognize that we can continue helping drugs who might need services, even as they continue taking drugs. That's key, because like in the Philippine experience, a lot of people are cut off from services and subjected to things in the name of treatment. For example, where you have people who are forced into treatment because they think you need to be fixed if you're using drugs, right? They're subjected to mandatory drug testing because they think it's a good thing because we have to find out if they're using drugs. So this is very dangerous, because this same thinking is that, you're a person taking drugs and therefore you need to be fixed by the sole reason, or by the sole idea that you're using drugs, is the same thinking actually that fuel the killings, and in fact tolerance of the killings at some point, because the thinking is if you are a person using drugs, then you need to be fixed and we will fix you no matter what. So I think we realized through the past years that is what's important. Yeah, I see you.
Thank you very much, Inez. I'm so sorry, but we do have 2 more speakers to get to, so I will have to end your intervention there. But thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your perspectives and your work on the ground in the Philippines in such a difficult time. And you've really highlighted a lot of the challenges that civil society organizations face in the region, and I just want to thank you for your work and contributions today. Unfortunately, the next speaker that we have, sorry, I just need to share my screen again. The next speaker that we have, we've had trouble, we had a video intervention, but we've had trouble bringing that up. So, and I can't see Mr. Dus on the call, unfortunately. So I have been able to just put the text up for the intervention that Mr. Dus, who's one of our working group members, wanted to make. So I will just quickly run through that so that we do have the voice of Samir Kumar Das contributing to this side event, because he's done a lot of work in the past year working with us as the working group. So Mr. Das is a member of our working group from the International Movement for Advancement of Education, Culture, Social and Economic Development in India. And today Samir's intervention will speak to the work of our working group and to the issue that prevention is better than cure. So I will just read out the intervention. So it's our pleasure to introduce Mr. Das as a member of the working group, who is very grateful to the VNGOC board and all other respected participants for having a chance to share his thoughts on behalf of the working group. Drug use, whether in Asia or any other region, has 2 unique opposite characteristics placed in the same coin. One as a life-saving drug and another destroying or killing the human life by way of gradually germinating in human health and body that may be termed as illicit drugs. Presently here from Asian origin, Mr. Das wanted to introduce the new strategies and mechanisms that we, for the harmful effect of embracing the common position to make drug-free societies due to failure of public support, regional and national policies, rapid expanding illicit drug markets and drug-related harmful objects produced or processed from natural plant products such as opium poppy, including opium, morphine, heroin, and/or synthetically produced illicit drugs, such as amphetamine, and finally psychoactive pharmaceutical drugs that have become illicit as a result of being diverted from licit uses or purposes leading human rights violations as a threat to state security. And we welcome treatment, rehabilitation, prevention, law enforcement with the ultimate goal of cure and saving lives. Some of the Asian governments introducing policy reform to approach drug use as a health issue, which requires medicinal purpose rather than crime, and some thought prevention, treatment or cure. Illicit production, manufacture, distribution, possession, and consumption of illicit drugs constitute criminal offences in most countries in our region. We travel many miles and have to cross so many milestones to enrich the touchstone of the common position, but different global political, economic, and social consequences create stumbling blocks to overcome the situations that NGOs face in the region. The Asia Pacific Working Group aims to leave behind this phenomenon, and we have a challenge with the common position to bring drug traffickers, including illicit drug marketing and production, within one umbrella. So thank you for Mr. Das for sending through that intervention. I'm sorry that we couldn't make the video work, and I hope that we've raised your perspectives, Mr. Das, on behalf of the working group. So finally, we've got 5 minutes left and one final speaker, which we're very much looking forward to hearing from. I'll now hand over to Emily Hughes, who is with the New Zealand Drug Foundation. Emily leads the New Zealand Drug Foundation's work on acute drug harm, coordinating their networks of frontline organisations that work with those experiencing the most harm. She acts as the organisation's interface with the government-led Drug Information and Alerts New Zealand system. Emily is also the Drug Foundation's science lead and works on their drug checking program. So over to you, Emily.
Kia ora, thank you, Penny. Firstly, before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that we stand with others expressing our solidarity with the people of Ukraine, and we are particularly concerned about those who may experience addiction or need harm reduction services or who are at risk of HIV/AIDS during this time. We call on Russia to halt its aggression. So today I'm going to briefly share how the establishment of our early warning system, uniquely housed within a Crown entity with police, means that the role of NGOs is paramount to its success. So for some background, in 2017 and 2018, Aotearoa, New Zealand experienced a significant spike in overdose deaths after the introduction of synthetic cannabinoids ABM Fubinaca and 5-FADB. Māori, our Indigenous population, have disproportionately shouldered the burden of harm. And this highlighted the gaps in the way in which widespread drug harm was addressed nationwide. As is too often the case, civil society has a tough job to get support to address acute drug harm and overdoses. And in this case, the New Zealand Drug Foundation had to work really hard to get these issues addressed. We were able to bring about change that has had long-lasting and wider benefits. Next slide, please, Penny. The New Zealand Drug Foundation proposed a model for responding to synthetic cannabinoids crisis, emphasizing the importance of establishing a network of communications for identifying acute drug harm early and intervening on both the national and community level. And you can see that response model in my slide there. Next slide, please, Penny. So the strong advocacy from the New Zealand Drug Foundation and others encouraged the Ministry of Health to help us to implement our proposal. An acute drug harm network led by us at New Zealand Drug Foundation was established quickly. And to strengthen the effort by the Ministry of Health, a discretionary fund was established. And this was earmarked for the development and implementation of grassroots community-led responses to acute drug harm from synthetic substances. And then what followed was the initiation of New Zealand's early warning system, DIANS, or Drug Information and Alerts New Zealand, aka High Alert. And this is run within our National Drug Intelligence Bureau. Next slide, please. So uniquely, DIANS operates within police, which allows information on drug use and harm to be gathered from sources that are otherwise inaccessible to us at non-government organizations. This includes things like customs seizures, police reports, and even coroner's data. However, understandably, it also presents barriers to the engagement of people who use drugs with the early warning system. So the New Zealand Drug Foundation has a special role with our network of grassroots community-facing organizations who have been sharing meaningful information with each other and having government's data also shared with them since 2020. Over time, it has been developed and refined to improve its effectiveness in preventing overdoses and acute drug harm, particularly among marginalized populations. The New Zealand Drug Foundation, the Ministry of Health, and DIANS have worked to establish better ways to gather and disseminate information directly to communities. And as an NGO, we act as that neutral intermediary for important drug information to flow to, from, and in between our communities. So here are some examples of how we operate. When there's acute drug harm incident identified by the early warning system, we support the linking in with local agencies who may have more nuanced information. We can disseminate resources or help make resources that communities need to respond to harm. And on the screen, there's an example of one of the notifications from our system. We also convene the Acute Drug Harm Community of Practice, as well as a National New Psychoactive Substances Steering Group. Both include Ministry of Health and DIANS and allow for a wide network of agencies to all explore emerging drug trends together. And most importantly, we also support the early development of community-led responses that address harm identified by the early warning system. So in 2021 alone, 2 peer-oriented drug harm reduction programs were launched in the Wellington and Auckland regions, respectively, to respond to increases in drug harm that were identified by the system. And those programs are already working. And on the slide there, you can see one of our programs, which is a peer-led program called Speed Freaks. And I just want to touch on lastly, Penny, how this links to the common position. So firstly, it sees drug use as a public health issue and shifts from the model of law enforcement approach to drugs to a collective and community-focused approach. Secondly, it works on shifting the perspectives of police and law enforcement to drugs and utilizing our national networks to share evidence with them on health-based approaches that work, meaning that we're now collaborating on other things and there's a willingness to do more in the harm reduction space. And lastly, we work on providing a platform for the engagement of Crown entities with civil society and shifting from a top-down approach to drug harm to a more integrated approach. So finally, we just continue to work together as a collective to better approach drug harm and to place our communities and people who use drugs at the center of what we do. But to finish, I'd like to lastly acknowledge that Māori continue to shoulder the burden of harm from synthetic cannabinoids and other drug-related deaths. And so we're pushing for more interventions for those who are impacted. These solutions will need to consider building a leadership and partnership with Māori, and where possible, work on a kaupapa Māori approach. Ngā mihi nui, thank you.
Almost got through the side event without forgetting to unmute myself, but just at the end, I've buggered that up. Thank you very much, Emily, for your intervention this evening. It's really great to see the work of the New Zealand Drug Foundation working with government agencies on the ground to implement services and programs that really work for people who use drugs in New Zealand and identify potential future causes of harm within the early warning system. So thank you for your work. I will just note that we are slightly over time now, so I will close the side event, and unfortunately we have run out of time for Q&A. There have been some questions coming through the chat. At the moment, Cressida, any NGO is welcome to sign up to the common position, particularly those working in the Asia Pacific region. But we may, as we get through the sign-ons, we may have a separate list of regional NGO people, organizations working in the region, and a separate list of other organizations around the world that do support the common position in our region. So finally, I just wanted to close by summing up that we've presented to you the Asia Pacific Civil Society Common Position on Drugs, which has been a collaborative effort led by the working group. I wish to thank all of our working group members for the time and effort you have all put into the formation of this document, and thank all civil society members from across the region that fed into the consultation process. We thank each and every civil society member who contributed for their input and efforts to find consensus across the diversity of perspectives that we all represent as members of civil society from across the Asia Pacific region. Today, we call on civil society organizations to sign on to the Common Position document if you haven't already, and to commit to ensure that the voice of civil society is heard in the creation of evidence-based laws, policies, and interventions in line with regional and international treaties and declarations in our region. Finally, we urge member states from across the Asia Pacific region to recognize these recommendations that we have presented in the document, and to work with your local civil society organizations to implement these recommendations within local responses to the world drug situation. Finally, we urge member states to work with civil society organizations to strive to continue to overcome challenges and continue to build on our achievements to place human rights, health, and evidence at the center of all drug policies. On that note, I will close the meeting. We look forward to meeting with the working group again and continuing our work and hearing any and all feedback from any of our members from the region. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you and to work with our working group members on this document. We wish you the very best for the rest of CND week and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
you.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
colleagues.
you.
Thank you.